it's been quite beyond what we expected. Welcome back from that tie between Arsenal and of course welcome back from that tie between Arsenal and Real Madrid. Arsenal stand Real Madrid at the Santiago Bernabeu, beating them by 2-1. Not a result that we did not expect, not one we predicted, not one I saw coming, although it was possible. I'm pretty surprised in the manner in which Arsenal handled the game. The tactics that Mikel Arteta employed were, for me, sort of, I did not see them coming. That's all I can say, because, I mean, there's plenty to talk about. But, oh my God, what a game that has been. Arsenal getting the better of Real Madrid over both legs, beating them in the first leg 3-0 and beating them in the reverse fixture by 2-1 to knock them out of the UEFA Champions League by 5-1 on aggregate, and to reach their third semi-final of the UEFA Champions League. Of course, the first coming back in 2006. I think in that semi-final they went on to play Villarreal, the Villarreal side that had Riquelme, the Yellow Submarines there from Spain. And then, of course, back in 2008, when they played Manchester United, which they lost to, of course, Manchester United going on to the finals, in which they also beat up against Chelsea on penalties in Moscow. So, I mean, really, United went on to lift that UEFA Champions League title, and ever since then, Arsenal had never made it back to the semi-finals of the UEFA Champions League. And they have done it in incredible style, in spectacular fashion, in spectacular style, beating up against Real Madrid over 2 legs by 5-1 on aggregate. Arsenal, Mikel Arteta has made history for the club and for himself. Last season, of course, he guided the club to a quarter-final finish, of course, getting knocked out by FC Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich, who themselves have now been knocked out by Inter Milan, following that 2-2 draw at the San Siro. We all remember that, Inter Milan had beaten them 2-1 in the first leg, but we'll get to that just in a couple of minutes. But for now, it's that Arsenal game that we are looking at. Now, of course, what Arsenal did best was to deny Real Madrid the opportunity to get that early goal in the first 15-20 minutes. They denied them that chance. It never came for them. Mal, hi Mal, thank you for tuning to the broadcast. You're much appreciated, Mal. Kindly click that subscribe button if you don't mind. Hi, Haida Khan. Thank you for tuning to the broadcast. Any football fans out there, do let me know what you thought of Arsenal versus Real Madrid. Arsenal have just beaten up against Real Madrid. Lucas, thank you for tuning to the broadcast. You're much appreciated. Potter, thank you so much. You're much appreciated, brother. Do click that subscribe button so that we can continue to go. We are discussing the result of that game in the UEFA Champions League, in which Arsenal have just beaten up against Real Madrid, the reigning champions of the UEFA Champions League, by 2-1 at the Santiago Bernabeu. Yes, subscribe, Lucas. Thank you so much. So, goals by Bukayo Saka and Gabriel Martinelli were the ones that sealed the deal, while Vinicius Jr. did pick what turned out to be a mere consolation for Real Madrid on the night, in a game that Arsenal really controlled. Like we did speak in the preview that Arsenal would be happy to concede overall possession to Real Madrid. They did just that. I was looking at some of the numbers from in terms of statistics from the live score up there, what they're giving us, that Real Madrid had as much as about 60% of the overall possession, but they were unable to make that count quite in spectacular fashion, or in pretty much what we had anticipated for ourselves on here. They do say overall possession was 66% for Real Madrid, while Arsenal only managed an overall 34%. So, guys, do let me know what your thoughts were. You are wonderful always. Remember, God died for you. Amen, Mal. Thank you so much for the love. Yes, thank you for being a good Christian. Somebody is asking, what are you saying? We are talking about that UEFA Champions League game in which Arsenal have beaten up against Real Madrid by 2-1 at the Santiago Bernabeu to advance to the semi-finals of this year's UEFA Champions League on a 5-1 aggregate score. Yes. So into the game itself, of course, Arsenal denied Real Madrid the space. They denied them opportunities. They slowed down the pace of the game. They did not raise the tempo of the game to suit Real Madrid's, fashion of play. That because Real Madrid love that high intensity game, that pacey game, that quick and fast game. Arsenal denied them that opportunity, and we clearly saw that. Then, of course, they went on to win some set piece plays in the form of corner kicks predominantly, and again they dragged their feet. They wasted the time there when it came to throw-ins. Arsenal are really known for that. Players like Julian Timber, they are really known for slow kind of stepping on their toes in such moments. And then we even saw it with David Villa getting booked in as early as the 36th minute for time wasting because he delayed to restart the game. And this was all part of Arsenal's strategy. They sort of psychologically to pull down the pressure, slow down the game, sort of annoy Real Madrid by how slow you're playing the game. And then, of course, they earned the corner. Then, in an incident that had not been seen by the match official, Raul Asensio pulls down, I think, Mikel Merino. And then game is restarted, but then after a bit of a minute or two, the referee is called by the VAR to go and review the incident, and he goes on to review. While it is arguable whether it was a goal-scoring opportunity for Mikel Merino, and given how Thibaut Courtois had been able to collect that ball from that corner, it begs the question whether it was a penalty. But two facts that we will go with. First of all, there is a clear and obvious error in Raul Asensio trying to pulling down Mikel Merino. Two, Mikel Merino is in the box. He's trying to run towards the ball. Whether he would have gotten there is totally a whole different story. Whether it would have caused any disruption, I do not know. We can never know. But the mere fact that Raul Asensio thought it was fit for him to make that kind of foul really did not do himself any favors. And that was as early as the 11th minute. But earlier than that, David Alaba had gotten himself booked for a foul that he kind of didn't need to make. And that sort of put him under pressure of how he was supposed to defend, of how he needed to play with caution so as not to get a second booking and all that kind of thing. So that also changed the course of the game in a smaller context of David Alaba as a player for himself, getting booked as early as the 4th minute, and then Raul Asensio with that foul that for which the referee awarded a penalty. Now for the result and penalty, Martin Odegaard had held on to the ball, but he then surrendered it to Bukayo Saka, who I do not know who advised him that it was time to go cheeky with one of the best goalkeepers we've seen in the last 1 decade, in Thibaut Courtois, because he tried to dink him. He tried the penalty on Thibaut Courtois. First of all, Thibaut Courtois is a very tall goalkeeper, and he's been in so many penalty situations. Not that he saved them all, but you do not try to be that smart against a goalkeeper like Thibaut Courtois. So we all thought, for those that care to, for that particular moment, that Bukayo Saka really made the wrong decision in trying to go with that kind of dink, trying the penalty on Thibaut Courtois, which, of course, Thibaut Courtois, followed down. Of course, he collected that ball. He moved to the right direction of the penalty. For me, I thought Bukayo Saka needed to go, first of all, with power. That's the first thing. And one of, I think, the commentators was saying, for a very tall goalkeeper like Thibaut Courtois, maybe sometimes you're even better off going down straight in the middle and that kind of thing. But anyway, it was a missed opportunity for Arsenal to take the lead in the fixture. And but the penalty in itself, even when missed, it meant so much for the context of the game. What it meant was that it was an awakening call to Real Madrid, who, if they thought that Arsenal had come to the Santiago Bernabeu to sit back and try and defend, where they were going to try and attack, they were going to look for those goal opportunities, they were going to look to compromise them in every situation that they could find themselves at any form of advantage. And that sort of, awakened Real Madrid. Now, moving forward, of course, Arsenal, every time they won the ball back, whether it was in high places, in high up the pitch, whether it was within their own half, even when they had sort of that numerical advantage in attacking phases, they again slowed down the game. And in the first moments, it kind of irritated me. And I was like, what are Arsenal thinking? Why are they not driving forward? But all that was very tactical in slowing down the tempo of the game, in not trying to concede possession easily just because they're trying to drive forward and get a goal, which, by the way, they did not desperately need, and that kind of thing. So it was a lot to play on the minds of Real Madrid. They simply slowed down that game. They slowed it down. They did not rush to go forward. They passed the ball forward a bit, passed it backwards in between, and then conceded possession. Every time they conceded possession, they were happy to retreat back sort of within their own half and then try and form a defensive block and then try to win the ball back and that kind of thing. And they did it over and over again. And it was quite, from a tactical point of view, it was quite impressive to watch. If you're an Arsenal fan, it was impressive to watch. If you're a neutral fan who just wanted to enjoy the game, in a way it was kind of disappointing or irritating, because maybe you would have preferred a very electric game where both sides are running at each other, from one box to another and back and forth like that. But anyway, the game went into halftime goalless, and clearly Arsenal had been able to nullify Madrid's biggest sort of tool of threat, the threat of conceding in the first of all, in the first 10, 15 or 20 minutes, then in the entire half as a whole. So they had foiled that plan successfully. So they went into halftime. Arsenal were pretty happy. Of course, Real Madrid must have been really disappointed with themselves that they had not been able to score. In any case, they had 0 shots on target, by the way. I think they had 0 shots on target as far as the first half was concerned. I really need to look at those statistics to be able to find out, because anyways, overall they had 3 attempts on target, 5 were off targets. So in the first half, I do not remember any open goal scoring opportunity for Real Madrid. But before the half-hour mark, there was a penalty call for Real Madrid, and the referee had awarded it for what had appeared to be as a tag by Declan Rice on Kylian Mbappe. And when I looked at the incident, first of all, I was quick to criticize Declan Rice, and I'm thinking, if you've seen a similar incident lead to a penalty in the opposite box, what makes you think it cannot lead to a similar result or penalty on your side? And as critiquing him, because in that phase they were not showing us so much of the replay. Then they tried to show us the replay. Of course, they were reviewing the incident. They reviewed a potential offside prior to the foul, and then they reviewed the foul itself, and then the referee was called to the monitor. Usually when the referee is called to the monitor, that means they're not sure, maybe or they need the referee to make sure that he's made the right decision. So when he went to the monitor, of course, at that point, Declan Rice had been issued a book with a yellow card. I think Arsenal fans were already, in that fearful kind of mode of saying, conceding a penalty, still in the first half, Declan Rice has a yellow card. That means he misses the next game. Should we advance to the semi-finals and that kind of thing? But referee reviewed the incident, came back and dismissed everything, withdrew or rescinded the yellow card that had been dished out to Declan Rice, and then there was no penalty. So game, resumed until halftime when it was goalless. And then comes the second half. Again, coming into the second half, I'm sure the plan for Real Madrid must have, again, or the goal must have been really almost the same. Going to the second half, try and get that, quick early goal into the second half, in the first 10 minutes of the second half, or even 15. So that, because it meant that if Real Madrid score, it gives them morale to go for a second. And if that would have happened, then maybe it would have caused Arsenal to change their tactics, and maybe they would have, ended up opening up more. Again, that did not happen. chances did not come. Chances fell far between for most especially for Real Madrid because they are the ones more intentional on advancing to the Arsenal area. Arsenal on the other side, were they interested in going at the Real Madrid box? Yes, but at a very controlled pace, at a very controlled speed. Even when you had Martinelli do a run or Bukayo Saka, on the wings, again they would pause, they would stand there with the ball as if they're waiting for their fellow players to move further up the pitch, and you could see that Arsenal, all the other players, were being slow in coming up front, and if they did, it's oftentimes when they receive that ball from either Martinelli, either Bukayo Saka, the first option they looked to was playing backwards and less forward, oftentimes. So clearly that slowed down the pace of the game. The game sort of, it didn't feel dull. They didn't slow it to the point of feeling dull, but they slowed it just enough to suit their game plan. And I think that really frustrated Real Madrid. You could see Carlo Ancelotti on the touchline looking really puzzled, lost of ideas of what to do. He tried to, command his players into action, but I think he looked at the game plan and he must, at some level, from one manager to another, especially from a senior manager to a junior manager, that's in comparison to Carlo Ancelotti and Mikel Arteta, must, at a certain level, appreciated Mikel Arteta for his game plan that he had brought to this particular fixture. And then guess what? In the 65th minute, Martin Odegaard, with all his intricacy and trickery, somehow conjured something, because Arsenal are in the attack, they have the ball, it starts with Bukayo Saka, they pass it around Martin Odegaard, then who eventually passes it to Mikel Merino, who eventually provides the assist as Bukayo Saka, chips that ball over Thibaut Courtois beyond his reach in quite spectacular fashion. For those of you that remember that sort of Messi signature finish of chipping the ball over the goalkeeper as the goalkeeper dives down, he did it, I think, so many times. On Iker Casillas, he did it so many times. On every time they met Arsenal, with Manuel Almunia in goal. For those of you that do remember, including I think that 2011, was it 2010 incident, 2010, 2011, or thereabout. So clearly, it's one of those things. It was a very, very impressive goal from Bukayo Saka, and he made it 1-0. Now, Arsenal were still basking in their own celebrations of now having it at 4-0. That's for the aggregate scoreline. They're leading a goal to nil in this particular fixture. And guess what? When play resumed, William Saliba on the other side lost concentration. In a split second, he lost concentration, wasn't aware of his positioning and what his surroundings were, and he conceded possession to Vinicius Junior after receiving that ball from David Villa, and Vinicius Junior scored in an empty net, and it was 1-1 because Arsenal scored in the 65th minute, Real Madrid equalized in the 67th minute. Now you can imagine 65th minute, there's a bit of celebration, and then play getting restarted by Real Madrid, of course, who lose possession to Arsenal, but then Arsenal, upon restart, that's when they concede. I'm sure very many people, very many Arsenal fans were still celebrating their own goal. And then it was 1-1, and well, wow, that was good. Now, that very moment felt like a spark of life for Real Madrid, because this was the first time they were scoring in the tie. The first time they were scoring in the tie. It felt impressive. You could see Vinicius Junior encourage the Real Madrid fans to increase the noise, get behind them, encourage the players that now that we've scored, maybe this is our spark point that needs to drive us forward to go at this Arsenal side. But Arsenal had the game plan, had the absolute game plan, and in quite Arsenal did not panic. They knew they had conceded, first of all, out of an error, so that also clearly tells you of how Real Madrid failed to create goal scoring opportunities for themselves, in that the only goal they scored over 2 legs was from an Arsenal error. Much like what had happened in the first leg when they conceded possession. I think it was Martin Odegaard, and then Jude Bellingham, makes that defense breaking pass for Kylian Mbappe to run to, and he nearly scored, but David Raya saved. Of course, for the 3 shots they had overall on target, David Raya was alive to the threat, and he nullified them, including one corner kick that almost went in, because usually David Raya stands somewhere in the middle of goal, but away from the line, somewhere there, waiting for that cross to try and cut it out or patch it out. Now, I think it was Kylian Mbappe who brought that corner kick, and he had gone straight for goal. So David Raya had to be alert to that, to quickly, punch that ball over the bar, and it led to a second corner. So it was a game that needed Arsenal to have the ultimate concentration, which they really had for the most part of the game. I think you only had 2 incidences from William Saliba, one that led to the goal, and the other did not result into a goal, where he lost concentration. But I wouldn't blame him overall, because for the better part of the game, he had concentrated. And remember, he's had to play while commanding that backline that has a Miles Lewis Kelly and a Jakub Kiwior, with whom they've not played so many minutes together, and that kind of thing. So 1-1 at the time. Then, of course, eventually you have Kylian Mbappe gets tackled, and then it appears a bit too painful. Real Madrid made changes, including introducing the likes of Dani Ceballos, Endrick. Of course, the threat for Rodrigo Guez, we never saw that for pretty much most of the half, apart from there's one very, very sharp cross that he had floated in during the first half. But no Real Madrid player was in the box to run onto that. So they made their substitutions, and we did see Henry come on. We did see Lucas Vazquez being withdrawn, Federico Valverde being sent to right back, because Luka Modric also came on in those changes that were made. So it was Henrik for Rodrigo, it was Lucas Vazquez for Dani Ceballos, and then Fran Garcia, I think, for David Alaba, and Luka Modric for Raul Asensio, while Brahim Diaz was brought on for Kylian Mbappe. Arsenal's changes, most of them beyond the one of Bukayo Saka, when they were substituted for Leandro Trossard, came much, actually, literally, I do not think any of them, some of them even had the kick of the ball, the likes of Ben White, who was substituted for Julian Timber. Julian Timber had a very impressive game. Vinicius Jr. failed to get the better of him on multiple occasions. And then Zinchenko was introduced for Declan Rice, Kieran Tierney was introduced for Gabriel Martinelli, and that kind of thing. But overall, that was it. So, again, in spectacular fashion, Arsenal win possession back. Of course, Real Madrid at this time have committed most of their numbers up front. And again, this is something we had spoken about in the preview of this particular fixture, saying that if that Arsenal will look to capitalize on the counterattacks when Real Madrid overcommit their numbers up front, trying to look for a goal. And pretty much that's what happened for the second goal, when Gabriel Martinelli goes on to score. So it was a poor assist for Mikel Merino from this one, but he did that in spectacular fashion, slotting that ball in the bottom corner, more like in a Thierry Henry kind of fashion of goal that you would love to see, but quite very impressive from Arsenal on the night. I'm sure Arsenal fans across the world will be pretty impressed, one, with the manager for the tactics he did employ for this particular fixture, with the players, with how they maintained discipline, with how they implemented the manager's strategy, with how calm they remained even when Real Madrid tried to probe them, with the so many blocks they put in, because Arsenal are really good at blocking shots. Again, they've only conceded one goal against a Real Madrid side who's attacking forward, everybody was scared to face. So you can imagine that tells you how impressive they've been. First leg, clean sheet. Second leg, it was Arsenal's own error that led to Real Madrid scoring. So that's as impressive as this goal. And they won it 2-1 on the night. So that's the review. That's the full review of the fixture. Perhaps tomorrow we will get to speak about it a little more and get, some of the reaction from the Arsenal fans and the football fanatics from across the world. But for now, allow us cross to the other fixture in which Bayern Munich were knocked out by Inter Milan by 4-3 on aggregate score. That fixture ended in a 2-all draw. Of course, Bayern Munich were the first to score through Harry Kane, and it felt at that time they had leveled, the aggregate score to 2-2, and you thought maybe they were going to send in, Inter Milan panicking, but Inter Milan did not panic. Simply, they probed or pressed really hard to score a goal that puts them back in control of the tie. And they did just that through Lautaro Martinez. In that particular incident, it's a corner, it's a set piece, and then Bayern Munich failed to clear the area. I think it was Joshua Kimmich who really failed to get the ball really away from under his feet and that kind of thing. So it fell in the path of Lautaro Martinez, who scored to make it to make it 1-all. So that's after, of course, Harry Kane had scored, like I said. And then, because Harry Kane's goal came in the 52nd minute, and then just 6 minutes later, Lautaro Martinez scored the equalizer. So that clearly tells you of how the goal that Harry Kane scored was a wake-up call to Inter Milan themselves. And then just, I think about 3 or 4 minutes later, Inter Milan scored the second goal through a former Bayern Munich player in Benjamin Pavard. That header that he did score off Hakan Çalhanoğlu's, I think, corner kick. He does score that, and suddenly it's 2-1. And then you think, well, the tie is now getting out of hand for Bayern Munich, because while they had been impressive, again, Inter Milan had done really good enough to try and limit their attacking threat, even when they had all the players. The attacking strength of Harry Kane, the experience of Thomas Muller, Michael Olise, Leroy Sané, and that kind of thing. But Inter Milan were able to neutralize those threats. But anyway, in the 76th minute, Eric Dyer did score to restore parity, so it was 2-all. Again, that meant now the tie is at 4-3 on aggregate. That means Bayern Munich needed just one goal to again bring it to a 4-4 aggregate score level to try and win this game. And they had some opportunities in there that, of course, they did miss. Jan Sommer, of course, also rising to the occasion whenever called upon on the other side in quite spectacular style. But again, perhaps we'll look at that fixture a little more tomorrow. Maybe before I let you guys go to bed, we can look at maybe a few reactions in regards to performances, because from what we're getting. Oh, by the way, before I read you those reactions, in the Premier League, there was a game, the game in hand for Newcastle versus Crystal Palace. That game has been played tonight, and Newcastle did beat up against Crystal Palace by 5-0. Alexander Isak, Jacob Murphy, Habib Barnes were some of those on target for Newcastle. I think McWay also scored an own goal, and then Fabian Schär. Yes, those were the goal scorers from that game. Yes, I didn't get to watch it, but I was following the updates from that side in quite spectacular fashion. So that win, just before I let that topic go, that win moves Newcastle into third place on the Premier League table, ahead of Nottingham Forest, and just 4 points behind Arsenal, while it's in second place at 63 points, because Newcastle have 59 points there. So that's just the update. Anyways, let's look at that reaction from there. Of course, Bukayo Saka did that Thierry Henry celebration that he did at the Bernabeu back in 2006 when he scored that solo goal against Real Madrid. Bukayo Saka, when he scored that goal, he did, that sashing of the rival fans at the Bernabeu too. So to remind us of that, Thierry Henry celebration. And so again, this is a big Arsenal fan in Piers Morgan says tactical masterclass from this guy. They are saying Mikel Arteta because there's a picture of Mikel Arteta there in a grid with the Arsenal lineup. Take about Mikel Arteta, your greatest moment as Arsenal manager. I do not think it's his greatest moment yet. I think there's more to come, and if they can go ahead and win the UEFA Champions League, maybe that will be his greatest moment. But for now, you will have to keep to lower his head. Yes, you will have to be proud of forgetting a number of Carlo Ancelotti over 2 legs in quite spectacular fashion. But of course, it's all celebratory mode around Arsenal. But one of those players that are really getting the plaudits from all over the place is Mikel Merino. Mikel Merino, we all know him as a midfielder who has been converted into a false nine in recent times following the injuries to Kai Havertz and Gabriel Jesus at Arsenal there. So this is, they say Mikel Merino's game by numbers versus Real Madrid. 32 touches, 14 out of 19 passes completed, 7 duels won, 4 aerial duels won, joint most, 3 fouls won, 2 chances created, 2 assists, 2 crucial passes. That's for Mikel Merino. Then this one says is called Adent Guna. Mikel Merino created both goals with pure class, no noise, just quality. Then this tweet is from Premier Panel. It says that Mikel Merino has come in and saved Arsenal's season as a striker in pretty, as a striker is pretty mad. It says that Mikel Merino has come in and saved Arsenal's season as a striker is pretty mad. He has basically approximated Havertz's ability to hold it up, win areas and link, and his box instincts are smart. Stop thinking outside of the box from Arteta to make this position change. Again, Mikel Arteta getting the plaudits from there. Who else do look at here? Most ball involvements by Arsenal players since Mikel Merino's first appearance as a striker on 15 February. Mikel Merino, 9 there. I think that's goals and assists, maybe. Then you have Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard in there. Then this one says Mikel Merino, this makeshift striker, run you have given us will never be forgotten. Then this one says Jakub Kiwior and Mikel Merino, 2 players who have been pilloried by some Arsenal fans. Tonight they can walk out of the Santiago Bernabeu front doors, take a deep breath and say, I am the man. We need to give these guys the flowers they deserve. Yes, like I said, Jakub Kiwior does deserve those flowers just as much as Mikel Merino does, quite in spectacular fashion, for what the revelation has been in regards to what he's managed. Of course, it was disappointing to see Thomas Partey get himself booked for what I regarded to be an unnecessary involvement. Because that means he does miss the next fixture in the semi-finals when Arsenal will be facing off with PSG. Unfortunately, it's a home game at the Emirates Stadium where they would have really needed his deployment between PSG and Arsenal. Remember, those 2 sides have already faced off at the league stage or at the group stage of this UEFA Champions League season, and Arsenal beat PSG by 2 goals to 1. But what PSG have been able to show us during the knockout phases really will be a big test for Arsenal. But we'll leave that at that. And this person says, thought Declan Rice was gonna start swinging to Partey. There are stupid yellow card. Yeah, I think everybody does disagree. Then EBL says Thomas Partey, a masterful performance in the 6th role as ever. He never shies away from receiving possession with his back to goal in the most difficult areas, but he was excellent tonight in those at doubling up and at tracking runs on top of his typical possession qualities. Declan Rice was feeling Thomas Partey for picking up a yellow card. He will now miss the first leg of the UEFA Champions League semi-finals, as we have highlighted that. So I think, like I said, if there was any disappointment that Arsenal fans will pick from that particular result, was the yellow card to Thomas Partey. Everything else will just be background noise. Real Madrid died in their own movie. All the mind games they tried to do, this whatever, play under a closed roof of a stadium, taking about for players, and everything, all the antics they did on and off the pitch to try and get Arsenal off, really outdid them, because it got them a lot of talking. They did a lot of PR as if they had to prove their name, their own name, and even status to the rest of the world in a fixture against Arsenal, who have never won the UEFA Champions League when they are the record winners of the UEFA Champions League, including being the reigning champions, having beaten up against Borussia Dortmund by 2-0 in last season's final, and that kind of thing. So, anyways, it's the road to Munich. It's the road to Munich, I think, at the Real Madrid Arena, but Bayern Munich are out of the competition. That means the host nation for the UEFA Champions League final no longer has a member left, because the semi-finalists are Arsenal up against PSG, while Barcelona will have a date with Inter Milan there. So again, those will be very long discussions for when those semi-finals will be coming. But we'll make sure we'll keep you abreast on all that and much more. But keep it locked on the Football Tribe YouTube channel. Do not forget to kindly subscribe to the channel so that we can continue to grow. Do not forget to comment, like, and share so that our videos do get recommended to wider audiences, those that do enjoy our broadcasts and much more. We do welcome all your criticism, all your feedback. It's really much appreciated. Otherwise, for now, allow me to keep it here, close it here, and wish you a blessed night. And I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Let's talk more about this result tomorrow. Bye-bye. Stay.